Good day, everyone. My name is Cordero, and I am here to talk about peace education as transformative education. So, before that, let's talk about what is peace education. We all know what peace education is, but the essence of peace education is transformation of the educator, of the student, and ultimately the society. According to Toure and English 2008, the total transformation of society and economic and social order is integral to peace. Yes, our current economic and social order is rife with physical and structural violence. Creating a culture of peace requires a fundamental change in knowledge, attitudes, behavior, and worldview, which enables the learners to take actions for a more peaceful world. And peace education thus seeks to play a role in this societal transformation. Now, the peace education that promotes a culture of peace is essentially transformative. It cultivates the knowledge based skills, attitudes, and values that seek to transform people's mindsets, attitudes, and behavior that have either created violent conflicts. This means that the learning process that utilized in peace education is holistic and it tries to address the cognitive, affective, and active dimension of the learner. Now, there are actions. The actions towards transformative education may include action against prejudice and war system or action for social and economic justice. Now, paying attention to all these levels, the cognitive, the affective, and active dimensions increases the possibility that the peace perspective or value that is being cultivated would be internalized. Now, there are also peaceable teaching learning process. First one is again the cognitive phase, the active phase, and the affective phase. This illustrates the process in graphic form. When we talk about cognitive phase, it talks about being aware, understanding what is happening. And when we talk about active phase, it's taking practical action. And affective phase talks about being concerned, being responding and valuing. Now, what is transformative learning and why is it important that we embed peace education in the transformative learning? According to Jack MEZIROW 1997, transformative learning occurs when individuals change their frames of reference by critically reflecting on their assumptions and beliefs and consciously implementing plans that bring about new ways of defining their world. Now, here, transformative learning is absolutely critical to the process of peace education. If we consider peace education as a practice for transforming society from a culture of war to a culture of peace, then it is implicit that our current worldview is embedded in the culture of war. Our knowledge, again, behaviors and actions are influenced by this worldview and must change in order to shift towards a culture of peace. Therefore, transformative learning is a necessary part of peace education. The transformative learning is also important or is important for all involved. For example, the teachers, and for the teachers also, they need to internalize these concepts themselves in order to be able to effectively convey to their students. So let's talk about peace education as practical or peace education as practical alternative. Now, educating for peace will give us, in the long run, the practical benefits that we seek. As stated earlier, it is expected to build a critical mass of people who will demand for and address the needed personal and structural changes that will transform the many problems that relate to peace into nonviolent, humane, and ecological alternatives and solutions. There's a lot of organizations, for example, one of our DevCom students talks about I am Mindanao. How are we going to promote nonviolence? And there's a lot of initiatives and projects to to make sure that we embed peace education and to help also again transform those many problems related to peace. And also, when we talk about the most common thing and the most common challenge in peace education is war. Let's talk about this. To illustrate what I said earlier, we know that war has been a core institution of global security system then and now, and it has adversely affected countless generation considering its human cost as well as its material and environmental costs. It has also led to the rationalization of violence in so many aspects of life. And peace education challenges the long held belief that wars cannot be avoided. I remember when we have a talk, and I have a talk in one of the projects of peace education. There's an institution that they shared about what is happening in their institution. Some of the students are being recruited to be part of what do you call that? Mga mag-rebel or soldiers para lang mag-war. And again, as peace education, as peace educator, it is really a challenge, no, for us to prove that it is it is possible not to make war. And peace education, again, challenges this view and encourages people to seek alternatives to violence and seek ways by which violent conflict can be prevented. I appreciate the initiative of the institution. I can clearly remember that they share they need to learn about peace education for them to know how to share it with the students. How are they going to start doing it, knowing that they have this kind of incidences or situation in their institution? So there are also schemes. There are also peace education scheme of knowledge, skills, and attitude. The following schema is an attempt to list the key knowledge areas, skills, attitudes, and values that are integral to peace education. Now we have three, as what we've told earlier, as what I've shared earlier. We have knowledge, we have values or attitude, and we have the skills. Now, in the knowledge part, the first or the number one is the holistic concept of peace. It is important that students understand that peace is not just the absence of direct or physical violence, but also the presence of conditions of our well-being. And not just that, it needs cooperation and just relationship in the human and ecological spheres. Now, this perspective under knowledge will help the students analyze these issues in an integral way. The second example there is the causes of conflict and violence. Here, conflicts are natural part of person's social life, but they become problem of violence depending on the methods of conflict resolution used. Students can actually study the problems of violence in various levels, from the personal to the global, and including direct structural, social, cultural, and ecological violence. They can also examine the roots and consequences of violence. And third one, some peaceful alternatives, conflict resolution, transformation. For example, we have there disarmament, nonviolence. Let me just go through with for the most common topics that are integrated in some of our courses. For example, conflict resolution, transformation, and prevention. Students can study effective ways of resolving conflicts non-violently, for example, collaborative problem solving, and how this can be applied into their lives. They can move on to examine how a conflict that has been resolved can be transformed into a situation that is more desirable. And another common topic is the human rights. It is important also for the learners to have an integral understanding of human rights and to reject all forms of repression and discrimination based on beliefs, race, ethnicity, gender, and social class. The students should be encouraged to respect the dignity of all, especially the weak and the powerless. And the other, for example, human solidarity, development based on justice, and of course, sustainable development. The second one is what we call some skills for attitude or values. It suggested that the following attitudes and values must be cultivated. For example, self-respect, having a sense of their own worth and a sense of pride in their own particular social and cultural background, as well as a sense of their own power and goodness, which will enable them to contribute to positive change. Another example is respect for others, having a sense of the worth and inherent dignity of other people, include those with social, religious, cultural, and family backgrounds different from their own. And maybe another example for that one is respect for life and nonviolence, valuing human life and refusal to respond to an adversary or conflict situation with violence. And of course, the most common one, the gender equality, meaning valuing the rights of women to enjoy equal opportunities with men and to be free from abuse, exploitation, and violence. And lastly, we have the skills. Some of the skills that need to be developed are reflection, meaning the use of reflective thinking or reasoning through which they deepen their understanding of themselves and their connectedness to others and to the living earth. Another one is critical thinking and analysis, and the most common and very important, decision making. For example, ability to analyze problems, develop solutions, analyze alternative solutions, considering the advantages and disadvantages, and having arrived at the preferred decision, or the ability to prepare a plan for implementation of the decision. Now, another one is the last one is transformative practice for us, for peace educators. As peace educators, the process of transformation must begin with ourselves. Peace education should have a regular practice of personal reflection and must employ critical thinking in their own lives in order to help students develop critical thinking skills. It is important also to note that this transformation is long-term process and need not happen overnight, and peace educators should constantly be seeking transformation, constantly question their personal assumptions and beliefs, and of course encourage their students to do the same. Again, we have to transform ourselves before we can expect the learners to make those changes. For instance, in order to help young people confront their prejudices, we have to confront our own and commit to changing our negative attitudes. Very challenging, huh? But we need to do this as peace educators. Another transformative practice for peace educators is that the pedagogies. The pedagogies used for peace education must therefore be, therefore, it should promote, the pedagogies should promote transformation through critical thinking, reflection, and action. According to Paulo Freire, he was an influential in the development of peace education pedagogy, advocating for dialogue and critical reflection as tools for transformation. Says there that there's a lot of things, there's a lot of methods we can use in order for us to integrate peace education, not just as a subject, but even into other courses. And as what I've said, transformation or transformative learning can occur on more cognitive, rational level or more artistic, emotional level, and thus pedagogies incorporating both modes of learning should be applied. And I will, before I end, let me quote or paraphrase a famous quote from Gandhi. We must be the change that we want to see in the world. And therefore, teachers must be the change that they want to see in their students. So if you are curious why you need to learn more about human rights, learn about nonviolence, this is the answer. This is the answer, and that is using peace education as transformative education. So thank you very much.